This one hormone is going to change the sales world forever. I'm Dr. Dan, I'm a neurostrategist, I'm passionate about the brain, and I'm fired up about this message on how one hormone can literally change your communication forever. So I, myself, Dr. Dan, have experienced this myself. Let me get rid of this stuff. Here's the deal. There's a hormone that we have found out and I have stumbled across because I've seen it work in my own life. I've seen it work in my own businesses. I've seen it work with hundreds of other clients of mine. And when I look at other influencers, people that you know, this is how they get their influence. It's just hard to talk about because nobody really knows how it works until today. And that's what you're going to learn because I get excited about this. I want to teach you reproducible results when it comes to your sales. I'm an introvert. I grew up middle child of 8 kids. I didn't like confrontation. Still to this day, do not like confrontation. I had a paper route growing up. A lot of people got free papers because I was afraid to go up to their door to ask them for money. That doesn't equate very good to being an entrepreneur or being in your own business because you got to be able to communicate. You got to be able to sell. And so when I started my first business, I learned the hard way and I had a lot of bumps, bruises, scrapes in the first year and a half. And then something happened. I literally did this one thing that changed it all. And I allowed myself and my real voice to come out. And this one thing is I actually started to tell my own story. And when I did that, I related and connected with my prospects on an entirely new level. Now, at the time, I would have told you it was because I was more confident, or because I had better results, or because I was more of an expert, or because I was more analytical and I knew the research, I knew the science. That would be false. The reason why I got results when nobody else did or when others struggled was because I just told my story over and over and over again. Well, it turns out that when you tell your story, you relate with others. And when you tell it appropriately, you will elicit a hormone that will bond and build trust with your prospects like nothing else. In fact, this one hormone is going to be what drives a lot of salespeople out of business because they don't know how to trigger it. And a lot of sales gurus are going to be very upset to find out that their method and their model wasn't what they cracked it up to be. So let me be clear, and you know this, attention and trust is at an all-time low. The ability to get somebody's attention and then for them to follow through, to commit with you, to buy from you is a whole nother ballgame. Attention is at an all-time low. You are dealing with the most cautious, skeptical buyer of all time. And where salespeople used to be able to get leverage was they showed up with all the information. Think about it. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, before the invention of cell phones and the internet, the salesperson had all the leverage because they had all the information on their product, service, or offer. They knew all about it when the consumer didn't. Now, we know one click away, we know more information than the salesperson. So this puts the salespeople at a disadvantage. And this had salespeople scrambling. In fact, when you look at the history of sales, that's when you go into features and benefits. They talk about features and benefits. They knew all the information. But when that didn't work, they went into rapport building. How can I connect with people on an emotional level? And that worked for some people, for others it didn't. So they're like, well, how can we make it work across the board? Why doesn't it work all the time? Then they went into question-based selling. Spin selling, these other sales models that you've all read and probably know about and heard about. I say this stuff all the time because I want to know what communication is most effective to get my message to the masses. And I believe that you have a message as well. And so what these salespeople then end up doing is saying, okay, there's a question framework. If you can walk in the door and ask a series of questions, then you're going to get a response that's going to lead them to want to buy. And so this led to all the new sales approaches. And again, it was the same as the old models. Some worked, some didn't. So what was the needle mover? And the needle mover actually now, we know, comes down to being able to trigger one hormone. So if you're like me, you'd be asking, well, why do we know this now and not before? Great question. Let me take you back to the 1600s. At that time, we thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. And then what happened is the invention of the telescope allowed us to see that it absolutely was not. And so it took some technology for us to see where the Earth actually sat amongst all the other planets. This is what's happening in communication today. We have more fMRI research, we have more brain scans, we have ever more precise technology that allows us to know what messages land and which ones don't. Now we have enough research to back up how the brain is making decisions so that you can make your message land every single time in the way that you want it to land. When it comes to sales, it was all about facts, data, and logic. We believed, and some people still do, and this is the problem, this is what I'm trying to help you with. We believe that the brain made decisions based on facts, data, and logic, that you can reason somebody into making a decision. That's so wrong. And so if you find yourself communicating with more facts, you actually are triggering the skeptical part of the brain. And we now know this through the science, through the research, through the scans, that people buy on emotion, they justify with logic. So it's not the facts and the data and the reasoning that's gonna help you get your message to the people you're trying to reach and to help them buy from you, which is the name of the game when it comes to sales. So understanding this brain turns out to be a very important aspect of being a better salesperson. And I'll say this, every one of us in our own right are salespeople. Your ability to recognize yourself as a salesperson is so vital, because when you do, you realize I better get better at it. And when you get better at it and you find out it's actually not what other people have told you what it is, see, this is when it gets fun. So now that I've got you on the edge of your seat wondering what this hormone is, it's simply a hormone called oxytocin. Now, if you're in any industry that would understand health or physiology, or you've taken a biology course, you may remember this hormone to be the breastfeeding hormone. It's the bonding hormone. It's elicited most in breastfeeding. When a mom is feeding and nursing her baby, it is at its highest both in mom and baby. It's the bonding hormone. You can elicit a hormone that is responsible for the mom bonding with her baby. That is arguably one of the greatest bonds known to man. And it turns out that if you can trigger this in your communication, you will win every time. So oxytocin is the sales hormone because it's the trust hormone. I wrote a book about this called The Trust Formula, where I laid out all the research on oxytocin and how to trigger it. And I want to tell you what it boils down to right now. One phrase says it all. Facts tell, stories sell. Story elicits the greatest amount of oxytocin than any other form of communication. So it turns out that the greatest salespeople are the greatest storytellers. And for me, I learned this the hard way early on. I used to just crush people with facts, data, logic, science, and research, thinking that I could prove them into making a decision. And unfortunately, I fell flat. An introvert who doesn't like confrontation, who grew up hating the idea of speaking in front of people. Now I love it because I learned the art of storytelling, not just random storytelling, telling my story. You need to be able to nail your story. It is the single greatest weapon of communication you will ever have based on the technology of human decision making. I need you to know you have a story. That story is worth telling, and that story will be your single greatest moneymaker when it comes to persuading people or getting them to buy from you. I can't iterate this enough. If you've heard me speak before, you've heard videos before, when I talk about communication, I will not talk about it without story, because it's the single greatest thing that we have to help somebody understand something, to feel understood, and more importantly, to take action. And this is where salespeople are gonna go wrong if they don't adopt this ability to understand the power story and to know how to actually do it well. So that hormone, oxytocin, which is blood-based but brain-driven, that means the brain drives it. The brain hears information and then it actually drives its creation and puts it to the bloodstream. When we take the bloodstream of people who hear specific stories, it increases. And when it increases, their willingness to pay, their willingness to follow through, their willingness to trust skyrockets. That's what you want when you're trying to sell somebody. You have to have trust. If they know you, if they like you, if they trust you, they will buy from you. And this is where sales will never be the same. Listen to what Rolf Jensen, a best-selling author and a futurist, had to say about storytelling. He said, "The highest paid person in the first half of this century will be the storyteller. All professionals, including advertisers, teachers, entrepreneurs, politicians, athletes, and religious leaders, will be valued for their ability to create stories that will captivate their audience." The same applies to you. You want to make more money? Be a better storyteller. We now have proof of this based on how the brain works and the chemicals that you can trigger running through bloodstreams of your prospects. I get fired up about this. I'm willing to go toe-to-toe with sales experts that think otherwise, and most importantly, I want to help you get your message to millions. There it is. I'm excited about this one. Leave me a comment below. Let me know if you agree or if you disagree. We'll see you in the next one.